In a lost corner of Tibet, the mountains stand guard over a mystery. A corpse like no other. A body centuries old that never decayed. Locals worship him like a god, but no one knows who he was or why his untouched body remains perfectly preserved. What was his secret? Could he have actually mummified himself? To find out, an international team of scientists will journey to distant frontiers.
The mummy fascinates me because I think it holds the key to understanding ancient superhuman powers.
It's a real mystery. How did it become mummified? And that, of course, is a $6 million question.
Along the way, they'll discover strange powers of meditation, secret rituals that can slow the body's metabolism by half, and may just change the face of modern medicine. Ancient wisdom that will take the team to the edge of death and beyond. Can they find out how and why the mummy's body was preserved? In the foothills of the Himalayas, in the town of Manali, India, a journey is beginning. A journey into the past. Tibetan scholar Victor Mayer, a renowned mummy expert, is launching the first scientific investigation into a mysteriously preserved body, a legendary relic.
It's been 2 years since I first heard about the mummy. I want to try to figure out how this man's body is preserved, whether it's purely a natural set of circumstances that led to the preservation, or whether it has something to do with his religious practice.
Victor knows the mummy is not just an enduring mystery. It may also have powerful ramifications for modern medicine as well. He's put together a top team of international specialists on radiography and human remains to investigate. Margaret Cox has been brought in to analyze the mummy's bones and biochemical makeup.
I'm interested to look for evidence of disease and maybe dietary information, which may tell us how he lived, the things that happened during his life.
In charge of the X-rays is Bruno Tonello. Bruno's worked in tough conditions before. He recently led a team of radiologists into Kosovo to document the thousands of corpses there.
This is obviously nothing like it. It's just it's actually the wildest place I've ever been to.
The team is taking the latest digital equipment developed by the military for use in harsh conditions, and they'll need it. This expedition will take them to a region where few have traveled. The mummy is located close to one of the world's most sensitive international regions, the border between India and China. And they'll have a narrow window of time to work in. The team has been informed their only access to the site starts in exactly 4 days. They must set off immediately. The first part of their journey takes them over the Jalori Path, and the expedition soon finds itself on the treacherous mountain roads. Victor's scientists have never traveled such formidable terrain before.
As you're driving along these roads, you feel like the wheels of your Jeep are hanging over the edge, and you're going to fall over and go straight down thousands of feet.
It really is steep.
Out here, the expedition is not just traveling across the miles, but across the centuries. For 1,000 years, the Buddhist monks have gathered in these remote, inaccessible valleys to study the great wheel of rebirth and the art of dying. According to ancient manuscripts, these monks could tap into the unimagined powers, long-lost secrets of the human mind. It was said their bodies could take to the air, transformed into rainbows. As for the team, they're still driving along the mountain roads. After a full day of twists and turns, they haven't gotten far, but it's too dark to continue.
We've only traveled 75 miles in 14 hours today. I'm quite concerned about whether we'll get to the mummy in time.
Yeah.
Exhausted and bone-weary, the team members collapse for the evening. But the second day brings more of the same, as the expedition keeps climbing to an altitude of 9,000 feet, nearly 2 miles in the sky.
The lack of oxygen up here is very noticeable. I feel slightly out of breath and lightheaded.
But other dangers are more immediate. Glacial runoff has swollen the Satluj River. Millions of tons of water are rushing downhill, making the roads almost impassable.
The force of the water flowing down these mountains is absolutely terrifying, and it could sweep a road right away.
This is a hard land renowned for its dangers, but ironically, it was one such natural disaster that triggered this entire expedition. 1975, the Spiti Valley, when an earthquake struck. 2 Indian Border Patrol officers were sent to repair a road ripped apart by the seismic vibrations. 12,000 feet up, buried in the rubble, they made an extraordinary discovery. The body of a Tibetan man, seated in meditation, perfectly preserved. A scroll was also found nearby, but it disintegrated before it could be read, its message lost forever. Victor Mair's expedition is about to enter the high mountain valley, a barren land originally part of ancient Tibet. Dwellings carved out of the rocks still provide shelter for monks. It's known as the Valley of the Monasteries. Finally, the team reached the end of the trail at Tabo, an isolated Tibetan community over 1,000 years old. This is where the roads run out. For centuries, life in Tabo has changed very little, but the discovery of the strange body on the hillside had a profound impact. Locals built a shrine to worship this mysteriously preserved corpse, for there was something inexplicable at work here. Who was he? How had his body survived the ages? To find out, Victor visits the local monastery to learn as much as he can before visiting the mummy. He's welcomed the Tibetan way, with salty yak butter tea. Victor accepts the tea for a chance to ask the abbot about the secrets of the mummy. He's surprised to find out how little they know.
Actually, they're not really sure if it's a holy lama or if it's just a normal village person.
Yes.
And so they're not sure about how old it would be too.
But the abbot does shed light on one ancient custom. The bodies of important monks were often preserved as religious relics. Like the embalmers of ancient Egypt, the Tibetans would take the intestines out and pack the abdominal cavity with salt or resin. Many important monks were conserved this way after death. Some were even dipped in vats of melted butter. And the precious Dalai Lamas, they are said to have been covered in gold leaf. Victor wants to discover how these ancient practices might connect to his mummy.
Why do they want to preserve the bodies? Why?
It's always been a tradition, because it's performed on high lamas, obviously because their body is holy. So it's just like a symbolism that they have.
These holy bodies, or kudungs, were worshipped for they were thought to bring good fortune. But Victor knows that the body they've come to see wasn't preserved in any of these ways, and the abbot has no idea exactly how it was.
Destroyed in Seconds, Tuesday, only on Discovery Channel.
What is happening?
You might want to fasten your seatbelt.
Own Lost Season 5 on Blu-ray and watch the final season.
The night before their ascent, Victor learns of another problem. Due to the proximity of the Chinese border, the Indian military will only grant the team a 6-hour window to complete all its work. Victor is concerned. They'll only have hours to do work that should take days.
We spent so much time getting here, and now we only will have 6 hours tomorrow to do all of the tests, and I'm worried that we won't have time to get them all done.
The pressures on the team are mounting. The next morning, members of the scientific expedition to the Tibetan Mummy begin to feel the full effects of the altitude. At 12,000 feet, with 40% less oxygen, the symptoms set in. Lightheadedness, nausea, fatigue. With each step a burden, it takes hours to climb to the site of the preserved body. But inside, a legend awaits. The team finally encounters the Tibetan mummy. And right away, there's a surprise.
Oh, look. Oh, goodness. It's so small.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
So
extraordinary.
I never would have imagined that he could be so well preserved.
Yeah,
Yet,
incredibly so.
Yet even before their testing can begin, the team has a dilemma.
Wow, we're going to have a serious problem here.
The local community clearly worships the mummy, but the offerings that surround him will make their work impossible, and the scientists don't want to disrupt the shrine.
It appears that he is considered to be a holy man, just from the objects that are arrayed around him. This would be done to a statue too,
Right.
a statue of a god.
Yeah,
So in a way, he's being treated as a god.
Yeah.
Luckily, the monks safeguarding the mummy grant approval to move the offerings for a little while, and that's all the team has. Even as they unpack, time is running short. They've now got less than 6 hours to unravel a mystery that's lasted centuries. Inside the tight confines of the mountaintop hut, the examination of the mysterious Tibetan mummy begins. An endoscope will provide the first clues, close-up images of the body.
There's quite a lot of damage to the skin. It looks almost moth-eaten is the only expression I can think of. There's quite a lot of mould, I think, growing on, or fungal spores on the skin.
The team is finding no signs of chemicals or embalming techniques. Nothing has been used to preserve the body.
If he was subject to any sort of form of preservation treatment, I would suggest it hasn't worked very well because of the unevenness of the decomposition of the skin.
Yet somehow, much of the body is extremely well preserved.
The eyes are remarkable because you've got a shrunken eyeball sitting there. And the other eye, which is semi-closed, the eyelid's complete and you can actually see eyelashes. It's extraordinary.
The flesh, the hair, they're all intact.
This fabric right round his neck, again, that looks slightly moth-eaten. And I can even see the reason why. There are little pupae, little maggoty things in there eating the fabric things.
Just about saw it there. There we go.
Yeah, they're all over the fabric and they're eating the fabric.
But something disturbing has caught Margaret's eye.
It might sound a bit ridiculous, but he's got fabric tied round his neck and under his thighs.
What purpose could there be for this strange fabric? Could it have something to do with his death?
If he pushed his legs forward, he would actually strangle himself. Bit of an odd thing, but...
Margaret gets approval to take a tiny sample of hair for a lab test.
We can actually do a radiocarbon date on it and see how old he is, because we haven't got a clue whether he's 100 years old or 500 years old or 1,000 years old.
Just as baffling, the question of who he was.
If he had achieved this kind of weird posture before death, what would it be telling us about him? It looks to me as though he's meditating.
Yeah.
I suspect that he was a monk.
A holy man, a Buddhist cleric. As a Tibetan monk, his life in a monastery would have begun at an early age. He would have followed the path to enlightenment in an attempt to become a Buddha. It was common for parents to bring their firstborn son to the monastery. In an initiation ceremony, the boy's hair would be mixed with rice and tossed into the wind as an offering to the gods. The boy then received his new Buddhist name. The completion of the ceremony marked the end of his childhood and the beginning of a new life as a monk. From now on, his needs would be few, the possessions of youth laid aside for holier items. Back inside the hut, they have 4 hours left. Bruno has to work quickly to take x-rays of the mummy.
Okay, right. So
You ready for the first image? Yeah. Okay.
And we'll go.
Oh, great.
You have a pretty good set of dental x-rays there.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that was worth the effort.
Using the digital X-ray machine developed by the military for use in harsh environments, the team is hoping to learn more about the mummy's curious posture.
So could the twisting have come about just because of post-mortem shifting?
Possibly.
So it seems kind of unlikely that the connective tissue around the spinal column would have been collapsing when the connective tissues on his hands and his legs and presumably his neck, from what we can see, is all in good order still. It's holding his body in that position.
So it seems a bit more likely then that this posture was adopted before death.
It could well have been adopted before death, either because he had no choice because he had a disease process in play, or because he'd been sitting like that for an awfully long time and it was the most comfortable place to be.
Or
You know.
he was meditating like that for a long time.
That's right. So I imagine if you meditate for a long time, it's quite possible that you would actually adopt a poor posture.
That posture, the curvature of the spine, all point to the life of a monk. Each day of that life would have begun with the chanting of the sacred text. Hour after hour, he would have sat reciting the mantras, the jewel in the lotus, the eightfold righteous path. Even as a boy, he would have learned to control his thoughts through simple meditation. But few monks would attempt to master the most powerful, most dangerous Tibetan mental disciplines. The mummy's severe posture may well be evidence that this very quest led to his demise. And what role did the strange fabric belt play? Time is running low to find out. There's only half an hour left.
I'm still mystified by this strap around his neck.
And
It
then
seems like he's got himself in a very contorted position.
Well, it's a bizarre thing to do because the one thing you could guarantee if you slipped was that you throttle yourself.
Would it have been with that in mind? I mean, could it have been?
I can only look at his bones. I can't tell you what was going on in his head.
Victor wonders if the fabric around the mummy's neck is a meditation cord. Since ancient times, monks have used them to hold their bodies in difficult yogic positions.
The idea of a meditation belt, I can see how that would work. You simply have something around the back of your neck and under your thighs, and that would hold you in position.
To continue meditating to the very last moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
But to have it wrapped right round your neck, it's something that could easily result in strangulation, and it seems a very, very strange thing to do.
The team is stunned to think the monk may have meditated to his death. But their 6 hours are up. Margaret only has enough time to take one last sample of the belt. So far, the team's investigation has left them just as mystified about this mummy as when they arrived.
What normally happens when somebody dies is that the gut bacteria that they have within their body will spread around the body using the vascular system almost as a superhighway, and that initiates an enzymatic destruction of tissues as well. Clearly they haven't happened with our mummy, apart from the very initial stages where you get biochemical change to some of the tissues, which is why his lip has started to curl back.
Clearly something strange happened to this monk, something that halted the natural processes of decay. At the end of the day, the team argue over the circumstances of the mummy's mysterious death.
But then he wouldn't have had this strap around his neck. Plus, we know something about these straps as being used in meditation, for meditations.
But we don't know if the strap is contemporary with the mummy until we do a carbon-14 date on the strap. If we do and get the dates as being similar, then you can say was something very strange going on.
So we've got to get carbon-14 dating both for the mummy himself and for the strap.
textiles, yeah.
From the evidence that you have supplied me with, I think the curvature of his neck, for example, shows that he was in this posture for a long time. Therefore, I think that his mummification was not the result of what people did to him after he died. I think he was a participant in what happened to him. I really feel that I need to find out what sort of meditation practice he was following. The book isn't closed on this case yet, but I think I know where to go. I think I know which direction to head.
Good luck.
Yes.
Victor is determined to find out exactly how and why the monk died, and what his unusual posture may reveal. The other researchers are heading back to Britain to run the crucial carbon-14 test. But Victor's path is about to lead him into a much less scientific world, a world of strange powers that not even he is prepared for. Halfway around the world, Victor has arranged to meet Dr. Herbert Benson of the Harvard Medical School. Benson's study of Buddhist meditation has revealed new insights about the ways the mind can affect the health of the body. For years, Dr. Benson has been conducting experiments on monks at Tibetan monasteries in India to understand the brain's ability to alter the body's metabolism. The results have stunned modern scientists.
What we found with respect to their oxygen consumption, in simple meditation, they decrease their metabolism upwards of 64%. And this was the largest decrease in oxygen consumption that was ever recorded in experiments by a simple restful procedure.
Carefully monitoring a form of Dzogchen meditation known as Tumo, the yoga of inner heat, Benson came up with even more intriguing results.
What we found initially in Tumo was that monks were able to increase their skin temperature in environments of 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
But his most unexpected finding was yet to come.
Well, what we found in these monks in very cold environments of 40 degrees Fahrenheit, wrapping themselves in wet sheets, these monks astoundingly could increase their temperature enough to get the sheets steaming and dry the sheets. You and I would go into uncontrollable shivering and perhaps even die of too low blood pressure.
Steam rising off the sheets. No pains of hypothermia.
They were quite comfortable there simply by performing their Tummo meditational heat yoga.
When asked how they do it, the monks describe relaxing, focusing on their breathing. They picture air coming in and out as a kind of energy. They visualize it as a flame, a fire that courses through the chest. Dr. Benson has also discovered that anyone who performs the initial steps of meditation will have a major impact on his or her body. Even for modern patients, the effects are profound. Meditation can help the treatment of stress-related health problems such as anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, and cardiac irregularities. Over the past 20 years, Dr. Benson's study of Buddhist meditation has proven that it can create certain very concrete physical changes.
Learning about Dr. Benson's work has given me a glimpse of the tremendous powers that the Tibetan mummy might have possessed. If they could actually dry icy sheets using heat visualization techniques, I wonder if the mummy could have dried his body the same way.
Clearly, there are even stranger factors at work in the Tibetan mummy's preservation. But first, Victor must establish exactly why the mummy died, especially since his corpse seems to have been healthy. To find out, Bruno Tonello takes his innovative digital X-rays of the Tibetan mummy to Ian Watt, one of Britain's top radiologists.
Well, I think they're fantastic images, Bruno, and I don't know how you did them. I mean, it's remarkable in the circumstances that you were working under. I suppose the striking feature, first of all, is the curvature in his thoracic spine. That's almost certainly because he was dehydrated and the discs have narrowed down at the front. Interestingly, we can still see some soft tissues lying in front. Then we come to the face, and the really striking feature was the teeth.
Yes.
I mean, he's got wonderful dentition. He's got no evidence of dental caries. He's got no evidence of gum disease. So if we sort of put all this together, what have we got? We've got an amazingly healthy-looking man of somewhere between perhaps 40 to 45 years of age at the time of death.
And no other generalised...
No, he was a very healthy man when he finally succumbed to whatever process that he subjected himself to.
But what lethal process would have killed the monk, yet left his body preserved forever? A month later, Victor's search for answers takes him back to Asia. He's gotten a tip about two other mysteriously preserved bodies.
I've heard that there are similar mummies in Japan, so I feel like I really should go there to see for myself.
Far off in the countryside, in the shadow of the legendary Mount Udono, lies a remote Buddhist shrine known as Chirinji. For as long as the fires have burned here, the Japanese monks have performed rituals to ease the burdens of their people, and one man above all, the mummy Tetsumon Kai, almost 200 years old. Local experts revealed to Victor the extraordinary acts that Tetsumon Kai was willing to undertake to ease the suffering of his community.
His left eye seems very empty. Is there some reason why it seems more empty than the right eye?
2 centuries ago, when Tetsumon Kai's village was stricken by a terrible epidemic of eye disease, he believed there was only one thing to do.
But did he pulled his eye out, plucked out his eye?
左手で左目って言うんだけど、痛くて取れませんよね。担当ってわかります？刀。ナイフ。
Knife? He poked his eye with the sword and took it out. Oh, to help others.
Yes, yes, yes.
So this is the concept of juku.
Yes.
Juku. Taking on himself
Yes,
the sufferings
yes,
of others. Amazing. He would have the, the determination to do such a very painful thing to help other people.
Victor learns that over the years, the belief in juku led many Japanese monks into acts of self-sacrifice. During times of famine, when the rice fields failed, monks would intentionally starve themselves to take away the suffering of the local people. For 1,000 days, they would eat only nuts and pine needles and tree resin until the famine passed. If these extreme practices also existed in Tibet, they might hold a clue to Victor's mysterious mummy.
I'm wondering if diet played a key role in the survival of the Tibetan mummy.
But why would the mummy have been caught up in the practice of juku? What exactly would have caused his death? And how would it have helped his corpse survive? Clearly, Victor will have to dig deeper still. A trail of evidence has brought Victor Mayer to Japan, the site of the revered Bukai, a mummy never filmed before, that may just hold some of the answers to the Tibetan mummy's preservation.
No one's ever been able to photograph him before, so I really feel a special privilege. He's bowing in a very reverent way.
Despite damage from the high humidity, the mummy is still surprisingly well preserved.
I need to look more carefully, but well, that's mold on his chin and in his jaw. So this would indicate that he has not been lacquered or shellacked or varnished for preservation. No one has done anything artificial.
No embalming, no special treatment. So how was Bukai mummified? Local monks have a startling answer. They say Bukai mummified himself. Victor learns that Bukai, determined to become a permanent source of inspiration, starved himself by eating only tree bark and nuts for 3 years. Then he climbed into this box. Inside, Bukai meditated for days. As he neared his end, the box was lowered into the ground. It was a living death, but it was also the key to his preservation. For 60 years later, when the box was reopened, it revealed a mummy. This then is what Victor has been looking for, the astonishing method the Japanese monks used to mummify themselves. And it all happened right here.
This is the hole where Bukai entered nirvana. It's very deep. I wonder if I can get down in there. Oh my. Take my lotus posture. This is a spooky place to be. And I think if you were not a holy person, you wouldn't be able to endure it. It's almost superhuman. It is superhuman. You couldn't do it.
Bukai's long starvation didn't just have a spiritual effect. It also shrunk down his organs and muscles and destroyed the bacteria in his intestines. With no microbes to eat away at his corpse, Bukai's body was preserved. Victor wants to know if this same process was at work with the Tibetan mummy.
Could it be that he starved himself to death as part of a meditational process?
The final test on the mummy's hair sample may provide the answer. 6,000 miles away, Margaret Cox has the only sample of the mummy ever taken. For her, it's a nerve-wracking time here at Oxford University's Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit.
It's looking in pretty good condition. It's very hard to tell, of course, whether a material is going to be good for dating, but we find hair keratin to be very resistant to contamination. That's 8 milligrams of hair. That should be enough for a radiocarbon date.
Good, excellent.
The sample is burned in a hot furnace, releasing the carbon and nitrogen isotopes within the mummy's hair in the form of a gas. The exact ratio of these isotopes reveals his nutritional intake. And since the hair was probably grown during his last 4 months, it could hold the proof to Victor's theory that the mummy was fasting before he died. Inside the radiocarbon laboratory, the burnt carbon sample is prepared for dating. It's struck by high-energy particles, resulting in an explosion of charged atoms flying out at 50 million miles an hour. These fragments of the mummy's hair flow along a magnetically controlled path, separating the carbon-14 atoms from other particles. This stream of atoms is directed into an atomic counter, where Dr. Hyam can read the results.
The first date that we ran, Margaret, was the hair sample, and as you can see from the readout here on the screen, the highest probability is that this date is within the 15th century AD.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a remarkable finding. The Tibetan mummy died 500 years ago, about the time Columbus discovered America. That's 400 years older than the Japanese mummy, Bukai. But there's an even more surprising discovery to be made.
The stable isotopes of nitrogen and carbon tell us something about the diet of this individual. The most interesting aspect of that is that the nitrogen is much, much higher, and one of the possible explanations for this is that this individual has been fasting, probably over the last 3 to 4 months of his life.
Victor is back in India when the word comes in via satellite phone. The test results from Oxford were even more compelling than he had hoped.
We have a date of about 1475 AD, so the mummy's over 500 years old.
Whoa. That's much earlier than I thought.
It's a real surprise, I think.
Wow, it's great.
So you're pleased?
I thought it might only be 100 or 200 years at the most. Whoa. That's amazing.
But Margaret has still more important news for Victor.
Yeah, the isotopes are really interesting as well. We've got high nitrogen levels, which means that he probably was extremely malnourished for about 3 months before he died.
Well, that confirms my suspicions.
It's really good news, isn't it? And we've got an extra piece of news for you as well. We've got a date now for the meditation bout, and it's the same age range as the mummy.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. And it makes my life a lot easier because now a lot of the things have some scientific evidence, so that's fantastic news. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Okay, well, you take care, Victor. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Oh. Amazing.
Piece by piece, the story of the Tibetan mummy is becoming clear. But for Victor Mayer, one question remains about the death of our monk. What was the purpose of the meditation strap around the neck? In the library of the Tabo monastery, Victor investigates ancient yogic practices and finds a surprise. The use of suffocation, self-asphyxiation, to improve the experience of meditation. Perhaps this was the reason for the cord around the mummy's neck. To find out, Victor has come to the meditation caves above the monastery to re-experience the monk's final moments.
The meditation cord is wrapped around my neck in such a way that it's partial strangulation. It decreases the oxygen flow. On the other hand, it heightens the experience of meditation, and it makes me more conscious of what I'm doing. Because if I relax, for example, if my knees go out to the side, I'm going to choke myself.
The meditation belt around the monk's neck forced him to concentrate just to stay alive.
If you're doing this, you really have to be trying to achieve something important. And I think what our mummy was trying to do, obviously, and he succeeded, was to self-mummify.
Victor has finally begun to get a picture of the monk's final moments.
He probably was not eating very much or drinking very much, so that would contribute to the self-mummification. But the strap was placed in such a manner that it would have killed him as soon as he stopped meditating. And I think that was his vow. You know, I'm going to do this to the last minute.
The story of the mummy is almost complete, but Victor still wants to know why the monk committed such a seemingly tragic act. He searches for an answer in the midst of a thriving Buddhist community of Tibetan refugees in the town of Dehradun. Here, one of the most renowned leaders may know the reason the monk mummified himself. Kochin Rinpoche explains through his translator the purpose of the monk's actions to safeguard the people of his valley.
And what Rinpoche knows about is of cases where teachers have specifically left instructions that their body was not to be touched or destroyed, and that would avert a natural disaster, famine, diseases in the country, and so forth.
Since the mummy is situated on a ridge facing the land, the motivation for his actions becomes clear.
The reason why he chose to mummify himself has been around me all the time.
The clues are carved into the petroglyphs on nearby rocks.
The symbolism that we see on this rock is at a stage before Buddhism arrived, and it tells us what the people who lived here believed in. The rocks are covered with animal imagery, but very seldom do we see anything having to do with plowing, planting, or fields, which this may represent fields. But in this area, even now, agriculture cannot play an extremely important role because of the quality of the soil and the aridity. It's so dry here.
Here then is Victor's scenario. The Tabo monk, facing a terrible famine in the 15th century, decided to make the ultimate sacrifice, to fight off the people's suffering by turning his body into a holy relic. In seclusion, he began his Dzogchen meditation, using the meditation belt to constrict his breathing, and slowly he suffocated himself until he died, believing his meditation would continue forever, as a blessing for an infertile land. In the cold, dry climate, his emaciated body endured as a kind of holy monument, an inspiration to those who would follow. But he wasn't alone. At the end of his journey, Victor learns that once there were hundreds of Tibetan mummies throughout the Himalayas. During the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese outlawed the mummies and began to desecrate any they found. To prevent this fate, the Tibetans preferred to cremate the mummies themselves. One way or another, almost all of them disappeared, except for the mummy at Tabo, which survived because it was just inside the Indian border. As for Victor, at the end of his investigation, the mummy is, if anything, even more impressive.
It's been quite a few weeks since I saw the mummy, but I'm seeing him now with very different eyes. He's still exactly the same mummy, in exactly the same position, but I understand him a lot better now. What I really marvel at is his achievement. He couldn't have done this without a tremendous amount of determination, fortitude, and intense concentration. In a way, he's a Superman. To me, he's a Superman. He did something that the average human being can't do. He set out to become a Buddha in this life, and he achieved it.
It was a fate both terrible and heroic, a sacrifice and a kind of immortality. But the legacy of the mummy has not disappeared. Today at Dehradun and throughout the Himalayas, a few Buddhist monks are once again choosing the same path to enlightenment. Remarkably enough, there are once again monks preparing to harness the powers of meditation to mummify themselves. For them, the mummy is a powerful spiritual example that resonates across the years.